Gurudev began by saying, "You are not that stuff which is in action." What does this mean in the context of spiritual evolution? Gurudev is pointing to the subtle truth that our essence is pure consciousness, not the doer, not the body, nor even the mind in action. When he says you are not that stuff, he is detaching identity from activity. In daily life, we say, I am working, I am speaking, but through deeper meditation, one realizes that the self merely witnesses. The actions happen through the body mind mechanism, but the being remains untouched. This understanding comes only when one's awareness matures through sadhana. Without that foundation, people confuse detachment with carelessness. Gurudev's words invite seekers to observe the flow of action while resting in stillness. That is true evolution of consciousness while doing happens in a complete non doership. Now, why does Gurudev emphasize that such knowledge cannot be given to someone who is not on the path? This is a profound point about spiritual readiness. Gurudev is compassionate, yet discerning. He knows that wisdom given prematurely can be misused or misunderstood. A person still deeply identified with ego or intoxicated by worldly desires may take I am not the doer as a license for irresponsibility, but when one has cultivated viveka or discernment and vairagya or detachment, the same statement liberates rather than confuses. Gurudev's teaching is thus aligned with the ancient Upanishadic tradition. Truth is revealed progressively according to the seeker's inner maturity. Only when the heart is pure and one's ahimsa or non-violence and satya or truth and awareness are firmly established can one safely handle the fire of such knowledge. Now, Gurudev mentions intoxication. What kind of intoxication is he referring to? Is it only about substances? Jayadev, not necessarily. Gurudev's use of intoxication is multidimensional. It includes literal intoxication from alcohol to drugs, but also the subtle intoxications, power, pride, attachment, or even spiritual arrogance. These cloud discrimination. A person intoxicated in any sense is dominated by tamas or inertia or rajas or restlessness. In that stage, the knowledge that I am not the doer will not liberate, it will deepen delusion. Therefore, Gurudev insists on inner purification before receiving higher wisdom. True sobriety is sattva, clarity, and balance. Only a calm, pure mind can reflect truth, like a still lake reflects the moon. Now, he speaks about a certain level of asceticism in evolution. How do we understand this evolution? Here, asceticism doesn't mean renouncing the world, but renouncing identification with it. Evolution, in Gurudev's language, is a flowering of awareness to experiences, challenges, and introspection. When one stops being reactive and becomes reflective, consciousness evolves. At a certain stage, worldly cravings lose their charm, and the inner stillness becomes natural. Gurudev beautifully bridges ancient wisdom with modern life. He doesn't ask us to become monks, but to live like monks within. This internal asceticism leads to maturity, where profound truths like "you are not the doer" begin to resonate experientially, not just intellectually. Now, Gurudev connects this to attributes like ahimsa, awareness, and truth. Why are these prerequisites? Because these attributes define the intellect. Without ahimsa, the mind remains violent and restless. Without satya, it becomes deceptive. Without awareness, it drifts into dullness. Gurudev's teaching shows that higher knowledge is not an escape from ethics, but it's a culmination. These qualities create a sacred vessel capable of holding divine understanding. Once established in them, once his reactions resolve, then as Gurudev says, as something happens to me, it's not going to bother me. That is equanimity, the hallmark of spiritual maturity. Now, Gurudev says your intellect is not stuck with any impressions. What is the significance of this? Impressions or samskaras bind the intellect with likes, dislikes, fears, and dislikes and desires. A stuck intellect cannot see reality as it is, it projects. Gurudev points to the liberated intellect, buddhi, that has transcended conditioning. Through meditation and awareness, impressions lose grip like a dust falling off a mirror. When this happens, perception becomes pure, free of distortion. That is when the knowledge I am not the doer becomes experiential truth rather than theory. The intellect then becomes a servant of consciousness, not its master. Now, Gurudev then introduces a strike metaphor. A rat is eaten by a cat, and the rat becomes a cat. How do we interpret this? Together, this metaphor reveals the law of transformation and subtle energy transmission. Whatever we consume physically, mentally, emotionally shapes us. When the rat is eaten by the cat, its essence merges into the cat. Similarly, when we consume fear, anger, or ignorance, we become that vibration. Conversely, when we immerse in love, mantra, and meditation, we become divine. Gurudev's imagery connects with the Vedic principle of Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha, food and energy layers shaping consciousness. Now, he extends this to say whatever you eat becomes you, not just physically but also in spirit. How deep is this statement? That's profoundly deep. Gurudev isn't merely referring to diet, but to what we take in through senses, thoughts, emotions, and company. Every experience is nourishment or toxin for the spirit. Watching violence, indulging in negativity, or associating with fear based people changes our inner chemistry. Conversely, meditation, chanting, and satsang refine our subtle body. This is why ancient Vedic culture emphasized sattvic food, sattvic thoughts, and sattvic company. Gurudev's wisdom echoes the timeless truth. You become what you absorb. Now, Gurudev mentions that the fear of the animal crosses its next part. Could you elaborate on that transition? Jagadev, this illustrates the continuity of subtle impressions. When one being devours another, not only the physical form but also its subtle tendencies, the fear, aggression, instincts transfer its an esoteric insight into the interconnectedness of life. Gurudev has shown that energy never dies, it only changes form. In the human context, whatever emotions dominate us at the time of intense experiences, especially death or meditation, move into the next phase of consciousness. Awareness of this process allows one to evolve consciously, shedding old vibrations. Now, he ends that section saying, Spirit is a snake is a red mouse. What does this symbolize? It's a poetic depiction of the cyclical nature of a transformation. Spirit manifests through endless forms. The snake, the kundalini, the energy and the instinct, and the mouse, the fear and the restlessness. The red color symbolizes life force or rajas. Gurudev's statement suggests that the same energy that creates fear or mouse can, when transformed, become the awakened kundalini or the snake. It's an invitation to transcend lower vibrations and realize the divine potential hidden within our very instincts. How does this metaphor relate to the concept of karma and rebirth in the Vedic tradition? Gurudev's imagery aligns perfectly with the karmic continuity. Just as the essence of the eaten rat carries into the cat, so our unresolved impressions carry into the next birth. Energy seeks completion, and until realization occurs, it keeps taking forms. The rat cat snake cycle mirrors the wheel of samsara. Meditation, knowledge, and service help us to transcend it. Gurudev often says, You are not just this body, you are the continuum of consciousness. Understanding this frees us from fear of death and inspires a compassionate living. Now, Gurudev warns that this knowledge should not be given before a certain readiness. How is readiness determined in the Artful path? Readiness comes through consistent sadhana, the practices, the seva, the selfless service, and satsang, or the association with truth. These purify the mind and open the heart. In the art of living, even the Sudarshan Kriya is a preparation. It removes layers of stress and prepares one to receive higher knowledge. Gurudev, like the ancient rishis, observes the inner vibration of seekers before sharing such wisdom. It's not about intellectual understanding, but about vibrational receptivity. Can misuse of such knowledge delay one's progress? Absolutely. When a person prematurely adopts the idea, I am not the doer, without humility, it can reinforce ego rather than dissolve it. Such a seeker might avoid responsibility or deny emotions instead of transcending them. Gurudev warns that this misuse leads to stagnation. True knowledge softens, not hardens, and spiritual maturity involves surrender and sincerity, understanding that realization unfolds through grace, not through assertion. Now, how does Gurudev's teaching balance renunciation and participation in life? Gurudev redefines renunciation as being in the world but not of it. He doesn't advocate withdrawal but awareness amidst action. The realization that you are not the doer liberates you from anxiety while keeping you inactive in service. It's a state Krishna advised Arjuna act with the totality without attachment. Gurudev's approach thus harmonizes karma yoga with jnana yoga, dynamic action with deep wisdom. What is the scientific or psychological relevance of such teachings? Modern neuroscience supports this as studies show that meditation shifts brain activity from the limbic system of reactivity to the prefrontal cortex of awareness. This corresponds to Gurudev's non doer state, calm, alertness psychologically when you witness emotions without identification. The nervous system resets, reducing stress and anxiety. Hence, Gurudev's insights are both spiritual and neuropsychological truths. How can one move from intellectual understanding to experiential realization of these truths? Through regular practice and grace, intellectual understanding is like knowing the recipe. Experience is a tasting the dish. Meditation, Sudarshan Kriya, and devotion bridge that gap. Gurudev says you can't think your way to silence, you can only sink into it. When you meditate daily, the line between doer and witness gradually dissolves. You become the experience. How does this concept with the Upanishadic idea of Tattvamasi, thou art that, perfectly? Gurudev's words are a living echo of that Mahavakya. You are not the action, not the body, not the mind. This is the same as saying you are that pure consciousness beyond names and forms. His discourse modernizes Upanishadic truth, making it accessible to contemporary seekers while preserving its essence. Why does fear seem to be central in these metaphors like rat, cat, or snake? Jagadev, fear is the primal emotion binding life forms. Gurudev uses it to illustrate how fear transforms as consciousness evolves. The rat's fear becomes a cat's aggression. The snake's awareness transforms that fear into energy. Similarly, when humans transcend fear through knowledge and meditation, that same energy becomes Shakti. Thus, a fear isn't to be suppressed but sublimated into wisdom. What daily practices can help embody this teaching? Begin with daily Sudarshan Kriya, Padmasana, and silent sitting, and Seva to dissolve ego, and Satsang to keep the energy high. Observe your actions as if watching a movie, detach yet involved. Read Gurudev's knowledge sheets daily. Over time, you will notice a shift. Actions happen effortlessly, reactions reduce, and a deep inner joy becomes your nature. Finally, how can this discourage a discourse guide humanity at large in today's restless world? Jagadev, humanity is over identified with doing, endless striving without rest. Gurudev's wisdom is revolutionary because it reminds us of being. When we realize we are consciousness, not chaos, compassion arises naturally. It ends inner conflict and external violence. This is not merely philosophy, it's a practical path to peace. If even a fraction of humanity lives this knowledge, the world will radiate calm strength like Gurudev himself embodies, dynamic in action, still in the self. Jagadev. So Gurudev spoke about the snake becoming a mouse, the bird eating the worm, and so on. How do you interpret this sequence spiritually? Jai Gurudev here is beautifully explaining the interconnected web of life, the samsara, the endless cycle of birth and rebirth. When he says the snake becomes a mouse, the bird eats the worm, he is not merely describing biological food chains, but illustrating how life energy continuously transforms. The essence of life never dies, it simply shifts form. The womb's energy becomes a bird, the fish becomes a snake, and the cycle perpetuates. This is a parinama, the process of transformation in the material and subtle realms. Spiritually, this invites us to see that consciousness pervades all. It just manifests in different forms according to karma and vibration. Gurudev reminds us that nothing truly perishes. The play of life is an eternal dance of energy, returning to itself, just wearing new costumes. Now, so what when Gurudev says life changes, does it mean that rebirth is a constant, or is it symbolic of evolution in consciousness? It's both literal and symbolic. Literally, the jivatma or the individual consciousness moves through various life forms as per karmic impressions until liberation or moksha. Symbolically, even within one human life, changes reflects constant transformation in thoughts, emotions, and awareness. Just as the worm evolves into the bird in the next life, our consciousness to evolve through experiences. Gurudev's words to solve our fear of death. He points us to the continuity of existence, the essence of life changing means. What we are attached to today will evolve tomorrow. Just as day transforms into night and seasons renew, life too shifts from ceaselessly, reminding us to stay centered in the eternal witness, the Sakshi Chaitanya. Now, Gurudev mentioned the human form as rare, only 0.01% chance. What is the significance of this statement in Vedic philosophy? In the Bhagavad Purana and the Garud Purana, it is said that among 8.4 million species, human birth is extremely rare, the result of immense punya or merit. Gurudev's reference to 0.01% aligns with that wisdom, emphasizing that the human body is a divine opportunity. Unlike other forms, humans possesses viveka or discrimination and vairagya or detachment potential, tools for liberation. So when Gurudev says there is only a 0.01% chance, He is awakening reverence for our existence, urging us not to squander it in craving, anger, or ignorance, but to turn inward toward the infinite. It's a divine reminder that while all beings evolve, the human path uniquely allows direct realization of the self. Gurudev humorously says a human may become a chicken or a cow. Should we take this literally as a reincarnation or metaphorically as mental tendencies? Both interpretations hold value literally as per Karma Siddhanta. One's consciousness may indeed descend into lower forms based on attachments and actions, but metaphorically, Gurudev often uses humor to make profound points. When he says thinking about the chicken or the farm, he implies that our constant identification with lower desires of food, fear, or greed can reduce our awareness to the level of those tendencies. In that sense, one may live as a human but think like an animal driven only by instincts. Gurudev urges us to transcend such tendencies and awaken Viveka, the capacity to discern and evolve spiritually. What is the metaphysical implication of the bird becomes the fish and the life changes? Jagadev, it speaks of prana tattva, the elemental energy that animates all beings. When one form perishes, its energy doesn't vanish, it reintegrates into the cosmic reservoir. The fish's life may manifest as the bird in its next cycle, the same prana expressing through different vessels. This is also reflected in the Isha Upanishad, where it is said that Purnamadaha Purnamidam, the whole world, even when forms change. Gurudev simplifies this cosmic law to nature's imagery, showing that evolution isn't just a biological but energetic and upward spiral of consciousness seeking reunion with the source. Now, Gurudev says Hanuman are mosquitoes. Why this striking metaphor? Gurudev uses this phrase to jolt our perception when he says humans are mosquitoes. He is referring to our transient egos and restless tendencies. Just like mosquitoes flit from one spot to another, humans too jump from desire to the next, unaware of their deeper self. It is also a critique of the inflated sense of importance humans carry, thinking themselves superior, yet often living shallowly. Through this humor, Gurudev urges humility, reminding us that without awareness, we too buzz meaninglessly in the cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. But with awareness, even the smallest being shines with divinity. Now, how does this understanding relate to the law of karma? Perfectly aligned, the transformation from worm to bird or human to chicken mirrors the karma chakra, the revolving wheel of action and consequence. Every thought, emotion, and deed creates vibration that determines the next state of consciousness. Gurudev's teaching gently makes us aware that our choices in this moment shape our next expression of life. If our mind dwells in greed or anger, it binds us. If it rests in love and service, it liberates. The law of karma is not punishment, it is divine precision, each being evolving exactly according to its inner vibration. How does the art of living Sudarshan Kriya help in understanding this teaching experientially? Sudarshan Kriya harmonizes the rhythms of life, energy, the prana, through rhythmic breathing. The latent impressions of the samskaras accumulated over times begin to dissolve. As Gurudev teaches, the same life energy that animates the bird or the fur or the fish flows through us. When we experience it directly through breath, the illusion of separation fades. One begins to feel the continuum of existence that Gurudev describes. Kriya thus becomes not just a wellness technique, but a direct pathway to understanding the unbroken flow of life. Now, from a Vedic Dharma Sansthan perspective, how do scriptures support Gurudev's observation? The Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad speak of the transmigration of souls. The Bhagavad Gita likens it to changing clothes, just as a man discards worn out garments. The soul discards worn out body. Gurudev's imagery of snake, worm, bird, and fish beautifully modernizes these truths as a discourses aligns with the Sanatana Dharma principle that life is cyclical, guided by divine intelligence. Every creature is a sacred expression of that one consciousness, evolving toward ultimate liberation. Now, does Gurudev imply that even lower life forms possess consciousness? Absolutely. In the Vedic view, consciousness of Chaitanya pervades everything from the tiniest bacterium to the cosmic intelligence. Gurudev's example reinforces that life exists on a spectrum, not an isolation. Modern science too supports this with studies showing plants respond to sound and even cells exhibit decision making. Gurudev bridges this ancient understanding with contemporary insight. Everything that is vibrates with awareness. When we honor all life as divine, compassion naturally arises, which is the essence of Dharma, Jayagurudev.